these two are chosen with calculation because they illustrate what resistance against the United States means, in the case of the South Vietnamese, and resistance against the Soviet Union means, because by and large and basically and essentially, the United States and the Soviet Union are the same. Some of you will contest that statement, but they are both versions of capitalism, the one state, the other corporate. They are both imperial.
Way towards as points of good rating.
Generally, his thesis, stemming from ancient times, is that civilizations rise and fall about every 300 or 350 years. He says the cycle is virtually intact from the past, even into pre-Christian eras, starting with the Persian civilization, the so-called early or late Bronze Age, then repetitiously going through the Greek and the Roman civilizations, up into medieval times. He says now you and I are of the 10th generation. And I think perhaps out of the chaos of the states, out of the dislocation and despair there, and there's a lot of it, we can understand, maybe we have a vantage point, I don't know, we can understand what he's talking about, because things are breaking up in the States. And I would surmise that you're about 5 years away from our breakup. Because fundamentally our societies are the same. The people must change, and that is the only answer. The only questions have to do with how we can change. The only answers stem from us changing. He says, in the 10th generation, a point is reached when the acquisition and exercise of power by the state or by individuals becomes more important than the well-being of members of the society in which the state must rest. Power becomes an end in itself, and when the power elite makes life intolerable for the masses, and in increasing circles of population in the United States, life is intolerable, then that civilization is doomed. The superpowers have virtually cornered the market on political prisoners in the world, and that illustrates glaringly the nature of a superpower. You know, all of them are founded upon the lie and the bullet, the bomb, the spy and the lockup. As they say, the state comes into being by the sword, and it maintains itself by the sword, using biblical language. Nevertheless, turning the state over and looking at it from the people's viewpoint, you see, it's the institutional product of the people's sleepwalking, amnesia, forgetfulness, and greed. And so the abuse accorded political prisoners is ultimately the people's abuse against them, and a yardstick of our kind of revengeful childishness. It reflects on the fact that the cog, of course, empowers the tyrant, and the tyrant molds the cog. When you have the chance, read Camus' essay written in 1946, entitled Neither Victims Nor Executioners. He investigates how public silence reinforces what he called the terror. The terror. He wrote about the terror in 1946, where it was not noticeable to most people. They were still heaving sighs. The World War II had ended. But he said the terror is abroad now, and it stalks the world. And he says it's reinforced by public silence. They are the two sides of life today. Silence on the part of masses of people, and then tyranny at the top in its sponsorship of terror. Now we're under, well, I needn't run down. The desire not to be conspicuous in any way, here he's speaking to us as well, to merge into the mass, to resemble the next person exactly, never to attract undue attention to oneself. That all became universal. And this meant the complete erosion of individuality and resistance. He continues and he says, a cog is the dream of every tyrant. An obedient herd of cogs can be termed a parliament or an academic council, and it will not cause any worries or surprises, any waves. A cog titled professor or academic will never say anything new or fundamental or relevant. A herd of cogs can be termed the Ukrainian Red Cross, and it will count calories in Africa but never say anything about famine in the Soviet Union. A cog will shoot whomever he is ordered to shoot, and in the next moment upon order will fight for peace. And so Gandhi called his life an experimentation in truth. And one day he was asked, well, what is the object of your life? And he said, well, of course, it is to see God face to face. And to set the questioner off, he's very confused. To see God face to face, to seek truth, to battle for the independence of your people. How does this all fit together? They were all pursuits of truth, all interconnected, all into the synthesis of which he made his life. And so Morot says, truth has long arms. Morot believes that truth mysteriously guides the universe and humanity, that it could empower one person to stand against those who kill the body, but can only do that. I was just thinking, trying to get a few ideas together for this little trip through Canada, that the state is the only force around that can kill both body and soul. Because if they buy you sufficiently, you're already dead in your soul. And they've accomplished that. And then later on, since we're under nuclear terror, well, they might kill you physically as well. So Christ says, worry only about those people or that force that can kill you body and soul. Don't be afraid of those who can kill just your body. So the Russian mandarins and their KGB know this. They used to say to Gandhi, well, if they shoot you, what about that? And he said, well, they will have freed me then for the purpose of my life, which is to be with God. We don't have that much of a handle on that kind of truth these days, do we? And we don't believe it that deeply, do we? When it comes to violence as policy and as control, the powermongers are having their way. Because there isn't any resistance. Because people don't understand. Because people are locked in, rendered sheep-like. You know? And so fascists used to say to me in the United States, why, you SOB, if you were in the Soviet Union today, you'd get a bullet right in your head. Don't you understand that? And I said, don't you understand that that's why I acted, so that none of us would get a bullet in the head? Okay? Therefore, why don't we resist? We always have to get back to that question. Because there's no answer to the terror except resistance on the part of the people. As our friend Mendenhall said in those few remarks, excerpts that I tried to read to you, he says that people have to change. You have to break through the vicious circle of violence into which we are entrapped as human beings have always been entrapped by it, see, and get on with the business of preserving life on this planet. That's what it comes down to today. Okay? We're really struggling for survival, after all. We're really struggling against, remind us that the crime of despotism is fed by our crimes of apathy passivity, of captivity to fear of private public selfishness. They remind us that slave masters like Stalin and Nixon always equal many willing slaves, and that to give moral amoebas like them power over life and death is to really invite their whips, their shackles, their jails, in fact to collaborate with those whips, shackles, jails. And they give us hope that we too can raise a cry for the victims. We too can call criminality what it is, that is criminality, and that we too can transcend our slavery to become people for others. They do one thing these political prisoners, and I'll just close with this thought. They stand as the last rampart between ourselves and the total collapse, inspired, of course, by terror. Without these heroic women and men, we've no conscience as a people, see. During the civil rights era, the civil rights people locked up in southern jails for freedom marches, what have you, were called the conscience of the nation. A people must have, not only individually, this thing of conscience, they have to have it collectively. And they have that collectively as long as a few people have it individually. See? So without them, we don't have any conscience, and we don't have any memory, and we don't remember Hiroshima and My Lai today. And we don't have any consciousness, and we don't have any heart. Yeah? They are the collective heart of all of us. Without them, we become like Tolstoy's swarm. He says, that was the metaphor he used to describe humanity when it had descended to the level that we see so prevalent today. Swarm. We're products of mass culture, products of mass education. We're products of mass spirituality, mass religion. And out of that, it makes it very, very difficult for us to think in terms of quality. What small numbers of determined, well-rooted people can do. They are always, and now here I want to repeat this, they are always the definition of society as it should exist. Americans can no longer realistically turn to their government for redress or change. They can't turn to the church. They can't turn to the campus. They can't turn to the business community, certainly not the military. All of the major institutional manifestations in American society, they can't realistically turn to them for change. No, they're deep into self-perpetuation. And they do it through coercion, which gets back to the observations of Mendenhall. They do it through coercion of one type or another. Some of you are the dialogue. And so you have this profoundly positive attitude towards human beings. Why did Christ say to his followers, well, these works you will do and greater works than these you will do? Why? Or why did Gandhi say, given the same circumstances, grace, what have you, all of you can do what I have done or tried to have done and more. So on the one hand, they say people can do what they choose to do. Period. Christ was a voluntarist. Gandhi was a voluntarist. On the one hand, that dominates your attitude towards the larger masses. They can do what they choose to do. But on the other hand, our task is to inspire that through quality. And so there's this great paragraph in one of the essays of Moritz, and I hope you read the book too, which deals with the fact that the outgrowth of faith or belief is inspiration, and that the people need to be inspired. And you know, we say in the States that conspiracy, the same root etymologically, conspiracy is impossible without inspiration. You can't conspire against the state in the Christian sense. You can't organize against the state. You can't resist the state unless you're first inspired by some truth. So what is needed for us out of quality groups is the extension of inspiration to people. Okay? That's the best I can do with your question, which is a very good question. How does one person or how does one group get it together? They get it together personally or individually, but they also get it together publicly, and that's an element we often neglect. So may I just say a couple more sentences on that point? Recently we began to work with a group composed of that one issue because they understood that the growth has to happen simultaneously. The people who are getting it together personally are really not getting it together. You have to get it together personally and publicly with a certain simultaneity at work. Yeah, well, species of pretty violent things, you know. Part of being a cog, I suppose, is that you're hopeless, you know, which is to say you join the ball game and you join the big schmear. You really do. Yeah. So we have to struggle against that in our lives constantly because that's an illusion. There are more reasons for hope than there are for despair. More real reasons.
I guess that
hope is in people, huh?
Who does it for other reasons?
But we also, as a spin-off of that, we ought to be very, very aware of the violence that's implicit in passivity. And I'm reminded of just one discussion that Gandhi got into with his oldest son when he was asked if under a position of tyranny it is absolutely reprehensible to practice violence in response to the tyranny. And he said, in effect, rather than submit to it or bow to it, you better be violent. And he wasn't blessing violence by saying that. He was saying that the position of neutrality under tyranny is much more violent than the violence that is sometimes practiced to meet the tyranny. So can you fit that in with
that program day? That talk does not bury that music flow. Talk there's a necessity for talk in certain ways. The young listeners today, there are a lot more young listeners turning to FM now than ever before, and I think you have proportionally more young listeners, the 18 to 34 range, 12 to 34 range, listening to FM radio in Canada, and in Montreal in particular, than AM radio has. FM definitely, within a year's time, will be the young people's medium versus AM. And the AM rockers and the AM pop stations will be, excuse me to say this, dead on their ass. And I really mean that. And I think any broadcaster in this country who does not say this is either fooling himself or lying to himself. Because it will happen. It's a fad. It's an in thing, FM right now. Look at the people walking into the hi-fi stereo shops buying the equipment. Young people. Sure, you got a lot of older people with that too, but the young people are very aware. And the Commission feels, like we feel, they want more involvement, more human contact than just a pile of records. But they do want music at the same time. If you take that away from them, then they won't even listen to FM radio for music. They go into the record store, buy their album, their cassette, their tape, and go home and play it. And who the hell needs radio altogether? You just screw radio right, put it right down the drain.
Speaking from a personal point of view, I would like to see more FM stations serving audiences that have things in common, whether they live in the same geographical area or whether they have the same interests. But I would like to see more low-power FM radio stations in Canada from a personal point of view. Perhaps low-power FM stations, perhaps even on cable to a certain extent, would go a long way towards helping these people communicate and finding things in common and solving problems together. I think most kids today who carry AM/FM portables just look for the sound they want. I don't think they really differentiate between AM and FM. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's a basic fact.
What do you think of the concept of foreground programming?
By definition, in the CRTC regulations, it's quite broad in the sense that I think foreground is meant there that it involves the audience, that you have your audience listening rather than hearing. I think it's going to be an education process for us as well as the audience. But probably the most positive thing that will flow from the regulations is the fact that everybody will be doing it.
You've got to admit that the Commission, they're logical people. They're not fools. They realize they have to give that elasticity of programming possibility to the broadcaster and to the listener. Because remember, the tighter you make regulations, the narrower you make the variables. In other words, the narrower you make the choice on the FM and AM bands on radio. It is a very, very logical approach for us to take. A top 40 French rock station, not just a jukebox, top 40, moving into the progressive areas, moving into the different areas of that pop music culture, and giving the French people of this province a format, a program schedule, a music mix, a presentation in a contemporary language of the French tongue, let's say, that will fulfill what they don't have right now, that will not make them turn on to Shom and CKGM, that will give them a true alternative in the middle of the dial, and that's what we're looking at right now. And I think the Commission can see what we're doing, and they have not criticized us, they have not reproached us. And foreground concept is a more logical concept than the arts, letters, and science concept that they had in the past. Because naturally, it widens the possible base from which a radio station can program, can build a program format, can serve a particular part of the population. So we feel we're giving, let's say, a launching platform, a launch platform to these new Quebecois music groups and established groups to sustain themselves. And we're exposing the audience to this music as well. And live, something that we feel the Commission wants, and we feel the people really want, and that's why the Commission wants it, and that's why we want to do it too.
Well, I beg to differ with the definition of foreground programming. I don't think that foreground programming is necessarily spoken word. I think that foreground programming is any programming that's responded to, where the radio is no longer a vehicle of environment, as opposed to a dentist office playing the radio, and you playing a radio in your living room, or you playing a radio in your living room reading the paper. Some are foreground, some are background. To call a show on abortion foreground is only to assume that people are interested enough to make the radio the focal point of the room. And if they aren't, radio is going to suffer tune-out. We don't have the benefit of visuals to do this. It can be done, it can be listened to. But to do it for 15 minutes minimum, 29 hours a week, every week, presents an interesting problem. No doubt it can be solved, but the cost of solving it could be amazing. But this radio station and a few others like it have always been conscious of being in the foreground. That's why they play a broader scope of music to begin with.
Yeah, where do you see radio going, FM radio specifically, its role? Where do you see it now fitting in the 1980s?
Well, I see FM radio becoming radio in the 1980s. I think that technology is determined that FM, and that the band frequencies and the ability to give quality of sound is becoming radio. It's a definite technological improvement, and that has to become radio. More and more every day, more people listen to FM radio. I think that will become radio. There'll be radio and there'll be AM radio, which is definitely has a problem with quality of sound, signal problems, and a number of other things. So FM radio in the 80s will become the standard. It's inevitable. So I see FM radio as being the service module, and AM radio becoming more exclusive to something. And I think that to socialize radio and to control it is an interesting idea, that it needs control. But to slow down radio and govern it and make it go in a certain direction because you want to condition people, and I think that's the issue here.
Considering that the Commission has achieved its aim, that people have been serviced in the way they want to be serviced, and broadcasters have gotten together on, in the middle to satisfy both ends and themselves financially at the same time. The best man who does the best job for each and every format will win. There'll always be a number 1, there'll always be a number 5, and always be a number 10. Okay? If AM does a certain job better than FM, then AM is going to get the audience, even in the 1980s. AM is not going to roll over and die like people think it is. FM is going to have a fight on its hands. And if you talk to any engineer, AM radio can really put out as good a quality sound as FM can, technically speaking, if you listened on a $300 hi-fi tuner that was built to get a good AM signal, you'd find out that the quality of AM broadcast is not that much inferior to
So
what
then,
FM is.
to sum that up, you would say that FM and AM will be in deep competition
No
in the
doubt about
1980s.
it. No doubt about it. They'll be in competition within 3 years. They're in competition right now. Not for the total marketplace, but as people evolve with the times. In other words, the kids become teenagers become young adults become family people, middle-aged, young middle-aged, then naturally you will see a constant battle that if AM does talk show better than the FM does, people will not tune in the AM station because it's better technical sound. They claim it is. It's the content of the station. AM, FM, VHF, UHF, it's just a carrier. It's just a physical method of getting the product to the marketplace, or the service to the marketplace.
The recession or depression, whatever you call it right now, if that continues into the second half of this decade, I think it'll slow our development down considerably. But during the depression years in the 30s, radio, which is essentially free entertainment from an audience point of view, was quite successful, so perhaps we have to look at that angle. I think it will allow the consumer or the listener to be more selective in what he listens to. Whether we'll be able to provide the variety of programming and the choice, I think that depends a lot on how the regulations are implemented and, again, the financial circumstances.
It's been suggested that you develop that bilingual programming be dropped. All right, so that which means that a place, for example, like Shom, that does have bilingual program, might have to go either totally English or totally French. And how do you feel about this situation?
How do you feel about Montreal? That's what they're saying. They want to divide Montreal. They want to say there's English Montreal and there's French Montreal. In other words, no one can speak to all of Montreal for any moment, which is hardly radio's function to exclude people. I don't think we're bilingual. I don't think bilingual is the issue. I think that it's back to the principle that if people are going to do radio with license to have a signal by their government, we think you are responsible people. We think that you are not going to deal with any absurdities, that you are going to conduct radio in a responsible manner, that they should be able to speak to their audience. And if the audience speaks Greek and Hungarian, and there are ethnic stations throughout this country that speak 5 languages, because the media must provide. But to say, no, there's no such thing as bilingual, that you either are a French radio station or an English radio station, it's a point of politics. Now, what we propose to do is to speak to Montreal. If you take Chaume and lay it over Montreal, it fits. It's the only radio station in the city that fits the overview. 70%, 30%. The French do not want to hear English radio. Why do they want to hear Chaume? Is it English radio? I think not. I think it's Montreal radio. I think every market should be dealt with specifically like that. If they say either go French or go English, we have some very hard deliberating to do about the abilities of broadcasters in this country, about whether young broadcasters want to communicate or whether they want to simply do what they're told. I agree that FM radio in Canada, as the brief is called, is a very important thing. And it shows guidelines to getting the inhuman parts out of radio, the machines, that not giving the ability for Canadian production houses to come up with syndicated programming. This is all very important to Canada and its development. But to say that the language of communication is going to be governed, we're going to tell you what language you can speak to people in. What's more important, what language they understand. I mean, this is French, this is English. What happened to Montreal there in that transition? The analogy that I'll use is that we have an announcer that can sit in a third chair with 2 people, and they'll both understand him. But the saddening fact is they don't understand each other. And if they ever will understand each other, it's the job of media. It's what newspapers have done for years. It has made the left understand the right, understand the left, understand the right. And if all this is going to happen, if Canada is going to unify, and if Confederation is not going to be really critically questioned in the next 10 years, The U.S. is a great example of it. The media is going to be responsible. It's going to bring the country together or tear it apart. And any separation that keeps Canadians from hearing about the same thing simultaneously is not fatal, but it seems awkward. It feels awkward to say, well, what if we want to tell this person something and they don't understand? And we're willing to take the chance that English people will tune us out while we speak French, or vice versa. But the end result is they both converge. And that's a proven fact. This is the most listened to progressive station in this country. In the whole country of Canada is Chum FM. And its trauma is it's dealing with two different languages. Where Chum FM in Toronto has the same base of people, and they're losing their audience to American radio.
Then turned back to us and said, now look, you're a French radio station. Do you want to be a French language radio station? Then you've got to play the French music. Fine, we understand that. To preserve the French culture in this province, radio's got to be the reflection of the culture that the people have, that they want to have, that they want to possess, they want to guard, they want to maintain, they want to develop, they want to, let's say, push further into the future. If radio, if all media does not reflect that, that culture is going to disappear. So the commission, the first thing that they enacted upon CKVL-FM was, you're French. If you don't want to be French, fine. Apply for a bilingual station. Apply for an English license if you want. We don't give a damn. You have the right. It's a free country. We represent the people, we represent the broadcasters. You pay your taxes, you can apply just like an individual can tell us what they think the radio station in their market should be playing because they're a listener and they want to hear that. You as a broadcaster, you're an individual too. We're there to protect both the broadcaster and the individual listeners. We studied it and we said, no way. Ici on parle français, on a un esprit français, c'est une province française, puis si on fait pas en français, qui va le faire? Ça va disparaître complètement. We are a French station. We want to be one. I think the Gazette once asked me, they said, well, why didn't you apply for a bilingual license? We have been bilingual in the past. It didn't work. I hate to say it did not work. We would either irritate French people or irritate English-speaking people. So we had to offer them a distinct alternative, a distinct choice in the French language or the English language, one of the two. Honestly speaking, even sponsors didn't respond to the bilingual aspect of things. They knew and they know and we knew and we know now, again, that if your mother tongue is French, your tendency is to react more so to a French announcement and something spoken in French than it is to English. We're in a bilingual market, naturally, so we have to have guys specializing in the French language on the same thing that people are specializing in the English language. It is a very, very logical approach for us to take a top 40 French rock station, not just a jukebox, top 40, moving into the progressive areas, moving into the different areas of that pop music culture, and giving the French people of this province a format, a program schedule, a music mix, a presentation in a contemporary language of the French tongue, let's say, that will fulfill what they don't have right now